And I'm telling you, when you actually look at what he pulled off, when you really get down into the sheer scale of the ambition here, it is absolutely brilliant. I mean, it is properly genius.
Oh, come off it. It's a bit overhyped. You're completely ignoring the fact that it's deeply dodgy in places, frankly unwatchable in others. And the man clearly had absolutely no earthly idea when to stop.
Dodgy? Are you joking? It's a bloody masterpiece.
It's a bloated mess. You can't just throw everything at a wall for 3 solid years and call the resulting stain on the floor a work of genius.
Listen, for anyone tuning in, you wouldn't believe what we're looking at right now. Picture yourself sitting at a pub table with us, and we're staring down the barrel of one of the most absurd, monumental, and, well, polarizing pieces of cinema history.
Very polarizing.
Exactly. And we are absolutely not seeing eye to eye on this whatsoever. I've got this guidebook sitting right here on the table between us.
Cinema, the Magic Vehicle, a comprehensive guide. Journey 1, 1913 to 1950.
But we are not talking about some safe, easy-to-digest Golden Age romance today. No, we are turning to a very specific, highly contentious entry in this book.
Oh boy, are we ever.
It's from 1923, a French silent film called The Wheel, or La Rue, directed by Abel Gance.
A film that essentially tests the absolute limits of human endurance.
I vehemently disagree with that.
Yeah.
Look, if you take a magnifying glass to the history of cinema,
Right.
if you really zoom in on those microscopic, forgotten moments of pure innovation, this is the film you find.
Okay, a magnifying glass.
Right. Yes. I am using that magnifying glass to show you the exact moment the visual language of modern movies was invented.
Yeah, well, if you put a magnifying glass on the wheel, you don't see brilliance, mate. You just see a bloody shambles of a production.
What?
You do. You see cracks in the foundation, you see rampant self-indulgence, and you see a director who desperately needed a producer to physically wrestle a camera out of his hands.
I am going to prove to you and to everyone listening that this film is a monumental masterpiece. It literally hacked the human brain using rapid-fire editing decades before anyone else even understood what editing could do.
And I am going to prove that it is pretentious, incoherent rubbish. So let's have it.
Right. Let's start with the architect of this beautiful madness, Abel Gance,
The megalomaniac himself.
the visionary. The guidebook right here describes him as the Victor Hugo of French cinema. Now, you do not just throw a title like that around lightly.
Well, it's a title that implies a certain level of exhausting long-windedness, if we're being completely honest.
No, it implies sweeping, overwhelming romance. It implies epic scale. You know the history better than me, so what does comparing someone to Victor Hugo actually mean in this context?
Well, Victor Hugo, we're talking 1802 to 1885. He was the titan of the French Romantic movement.
Right.
A poet, novelist, playwright, human rights campaigner. He wrote Les Miserables. He wrote The Hunchback of Notre Dame. He dealt in massive societal cross-sections and extreme emotional suffering.
See? Massive scale.
So yes, calling Gance the Victor Hugo of cinema means Gance is dealing with the absolute extremes of the human condition. But it also means he's incredibly dense. Gance was a former actor and playwright himself, and he became a prominent exponent of the Impressionist avant-garde.
Which is a brilliant movement.
It's a movement that I think gave him a convenient excuse to just abandon all narrative discipline.
Oh, come on.
It did. He could just say, oh, it's avant-garde, you just don't get it.
Hold on a second. Look at his track record before The Wheel. The book points out he launched his best creative period with J'accuse in 1919.
Yeah, sure.
That was a massive anti-war superproduction right after the armistice. He's a guy who takes colossal collective traumas and forces them onto the screen. And he ended this creative period with Napoleon in 1927.
Ah, yes, Napoleon. A film that famously required 3 separate screens to project simultaneously. 3 screens.
Which is properly genius. Think about it. We go to IMAX today, you sit in the theater, and you think it's a modern marvel of engineering.
It's a bit different than stitching 3 bedsheets together, mate.
Abel Gance in 1927 wanted to expand the aspect ratio so wide that a single physical screen couldn't contain his vision. He wanted panoramic battles. That sheer, unbridled, aggressive ambition is exactly what he brought to The Wheel a few years earlier.
I call it a total lack of moderation. It's megalomania.
Let me finish setting the stage for the listener, because you have to understand the physical reality of what he did here. He spent 3 years making The Wheel. 3 years.
Far too long.
He shot it almost entirely on location in the freezing French Alps and at the bustling nice railway station. Imagine a modern director Imagine Christopher Nolan or James Cameron getting a totally blank check today, dragging a massive crew out into the freezing snow and just living on a mountain for 3 years to get the absolute perfect, authentic shots of a train engine in the snow. That is the kind of visionary we're dealing with.
Are you joking? That's not visionary. That's rubbish, mate. You're romanticizing it entirely. Do you know what it actually meant to shoot in the Alps in 1920?
It meant authenticity.
It meant a logistical nightmare. They weren't using lightweight digital cameras. They were dragging massive, heavy, wooden, hand-cranked cameras up a mountain.
Right, which makes it even more impressive.
They were using highly flammable nitrate film stock that could literally explode. Mechanisms would freeze. Spending 3 years shooting a film about trains in the Alps doesn't make you James Cameron. It makes you completely detached from reality. The producers must have been tearing their hair out.
Actually, it was produced by Abel Gance himself, and it was Charles Pathé. Right, Pathé, the legendary French studio. They backed this entirely.
And I guarantee you they regretted it every single day of those 3 years. Do you know what 3 years on location without a strict studio overseer means for a narrative?
It means creative freedom.
It means the director has lost the plot, literally. Which brings us beautifully to the actual story of this film, because you can talk about the freezing Alps and 3-screen panoramas all you want, but if the story is a shambles, the film fails.
The story is a grand mythic tragedy.
The story is mental. Have you actually stepped back and looked at the summary of what happens in this film? It is a soap opera on steroids.
I have read it, and it is a fascinating elevation of the 19th century novel into a brand new visual medium.
Okay, sure. Let's hear it then.
Okay, let me lay out the premise for you and the listener. We have this gruff, hardworking engine driver, Sisyph. Severin Mars plays him. And Sisyph has a biological son named Ellie, played by Gabriel de Gravone.
Right, the train driver and his son. Simple enough setup.
But then there is Norma, played by Ivy Close. Norma is an adopted girl who was orphaned as a baby in a horrific train disaster. Sisyph rescued her and brought her up alongside Ellie.
Sounds noble.
But here's the catch. Both Norma and Ellie are completely unaware of her true past. They don't know she's adopted. So to Sisyph and Ellie, she is, as the book puts it, to them, both daughter and sister.
And here's where it gets incredibly dodgy. Because when Norma grows up into a beautiful young woman, Sisyph, her adoptive father who raised her from childhood, realizes he has romantic, obsessive feelings for her.
It's a tragic realization. It's the torment of forbidden love tearing him apart from the inside.
It's highly uncomfortable, is what it is. It's deeply creepy. And what does he do about this tragic torment? He decides the only way to cope is to marry her off.
To save himself from his own desires.
He agrees to let her leave for the big city and marry this wealthy bloke, Jacques de Herson, played by Pierre Meunier. And because he is so internally devastated by her absence, Sisyph attempts suicide.
The emotional intensity is colossal. The guidebook says it right here. It's Gance's most colossal project in terms of emotional intensity. He is taking the internal psychological agony of these characters and externalizing it into the physical world.
Wait. We haven't even got to Ellie yet.
Oh, right. The son.
Because Ellie, the son who genuinely believes Norma is his biological sister, bids her farewell with a heavy heart. But then he later discovers the truth that she's actually adopted and his Keith is lost forever. Why?
Because he loved her too.
Because he's madly in love with her too. Both the adoptive father and the adoptive brother are hopelessly, obsessively in love with the adopted daughter/sister. You can't be serious. You call this high art.
Yes, I do. It's classical tragedy. The text explicitly tells us that Gance wanted the wheel to be a synthesis of ancient Greek tragedy and the dark romantic themes of 19th century French literature.
Right, so he just threw everything in a blender.
No, he is deliberately, consciously invoking the stories of Oedipus, Antigone, and Sisyphus.
Just because you invoke a Greek myth doesn't mean you executed it well. Slapping a classical name on a train driver doesn't make it Aeschylus.
But look at how brilliantly he adapts the names. Sisyph is literally a modernization of Sisyphus. You know the mythology, right?
Yes, the bloke with the boulder.
Sisyphus was the king of Corinth who was punished by the gods in the underworld. He was forced to roll a massive boulder up a steep hill only to watch it roll back down over and over for all eternity.
Right.
Sisyph, the engine driver, is trapped in the endless, repetitive, crushing mechanical labor of the railway system. He shovels coal, he drives the train back and forth on the exact same tracks. He is a modern Sisyphus bound to the machine.
Okay, fine. The Sisyphus metaphor works on a mechanical level, I'll grant you that. But Oedipus.
Antigone.
Yes. Oedipus, the mythical king who unknowingly fulfilled a prophecy by killing his father and marrying his mother. And Antigone, the daughter of that incestuous union, who is therefore also Oedipus's own half-sister.
Which is just a mess of a family tree. Sophocles was writing these plays around 441 BCE. Gans is reaching back 2.5 millennia to play with these incredibly dark, incestuous foundational myths of Western literature. The taboo of the familial bond. He's saying to the audience, you think cinema is just cheap fairground entertainment? No, I am bringing Greek myth into the industrial age.
And I am saying it's a convoluted mess written by Gans and his co-writer, Blaise Cendrars. Because let's look at where they actually take this supposed Greek myth.
It gets even better.
It gets worse. Sisyphe survives his suicide attempt, but his eyesight fails after an accident at work. So now he's a blind man. And what does he do? He gets a job running a funicular railway in the Alps.
A blind man running a train, the metaphor for blind fate is staggering.
It's a health and safety nightmare. A funicular railway, for the listener who doesn't know, is a system where two counterbalanced tram cars are attached to cables on a steep mountain incline.
Yeah, they pull each other up and down.
One goes up while the other goes down. It's incredibly dangerous, and they have a blind bloke operating it. But fine, let's accept the metaphor. He's up in the snowy peaks. Ellie, the son, goes with him to make violins or whatever.
He makes violins, yes.
And Ellie can only think about his obsessive love for Norma, and then we reach the climax, and this is where I absolutely lose it.
Oh, here we go.
The tragedy reaches its peak after a so-called chance meeting between Norma and Ellie in the mountains.
Chance meetings are a staple of romantic tragedy.
Listen to the catalyst for the finale, please. Just listen to what actually causes the climax. Norma's jealous, wealthy husband, Jacques, is misinformed by his Greek geologist friend.
Okay, I admit the geologist is...
I am not making this up. It says it right here in the source book.
Yeah.
His Greek geologist friend, Kalatera Karaskopoulos, played by Max Maxudian, a Greek geologist, ruins everything.
It's just a minor character.
You can't be serious. A bloke looking at rocks is what sets off the deadly fight.
It's a narrative device. He needed a character to deliver the fatal misunderstanding.
It's utterly absurd. A bloke named Kalatera Karaskopoulos whispers a rumor in Jacques' ear, so Jacques travels all the way up a mountain in the Alps to punish Ellie. They meet on a cliff edge, they have a physical brawl, and both Ellie and Jacques fall over a precipice in a deadly intertwined embrace. They both just fall off a cliff.
Which violently resolves the tension. The hubris is punished.
It's infantile, it's terrible writing. And then the ending. Norma, the now widowed adopted daughter, returns to her blind adoptive father who used to be in love with her to look after him in the mountains for the rest of his days while he stares blindly into the snow.
It's poetic.
The book literally sums it up perfectly. It says the outcome is not a success either in content or narrative coherence. Gans showed absolutely no sense of narrative harmony. He had a really exceptional talent for just dragging out a story forever.
But the author of the book is being way too harsh on the ambition. The book complains that Gans spoiled the film with pretentious literary allusions ranging from Aeschylus to Gabriel D'Annunzio.
Because he did.
But think about the context. Aeschylus was the ancient Greek father of tragedy, the guy who fundamentally changed theater by expanding the number of actors on stage to allow for actual conflict, rather than just having one guy talking to a chorus.
I know who Aeschylus is.
If you were a filmmaker in 1923 trying to legitimize a brand new medium, who else are you going to borrow from? You borrow from the founder of drama.
Borrowing from Aeschylus is fine in theory. Smashing Aeschylus, Victor Hugo, and an uncomfortable adoption romance, and a Greek geologist named Kalatera Karaskopoulos into a film about a blind train driver on a funicular is exactly why the text calls it a failure in narrative coherence.
Yeah, who just don't like melodrama.
He tried to do everything, and spoiled the film with naive situations and infantile symbolism. That's from the book.
Okay. Let's say, just for the sake of argument, that the plot is a lot. Let's say it's dense. I will concede that a modern audience, or even an audience back then, might find the melodrama a bit thick.
A bit thick. It's practically impenetrable, mate.
Hear me out. Because even if you absolutely despise the story, you cannot deny the engine of innovation driving this film. This is where Gans is undeniably 100% spot on.
Right, here comes the technical defense.
The technical achievements of the wheel literally changed the visual language of cinema forever. If the story is a shambles, the technique is why this film is still in the guidebook. We have to talk about the visual consonants.
Right, the editing. I will admit, begrudgingly, this is the one single area where I am genuinely gobsmacked by what he achieved.
Thank you. Finally, some sense. The guidebook states very clearly that this melodramatic epic has found a lasting place in film history because it uses almost all the syntactic components of the language of cinema.
It does say that, yeah.
It is a splendid, unprecedented display of the potential of this new art form. And the absolute cornerstone of that is the editing.
The book calls it a turning point in the development of editing as a means of expression. And it's true.
Exactly. Explain the historical context of that for the listener, because it's massive. Gans was the first to take D.W. Griffith's American experiments and transplant them into European soil,
Right. So D.W. Griffith in America was experimenting with cross-cutting.
showing two things happening at the same time in different places.
Exactly, to build tension. But Gans took that concept and weaponized it. He didn't just cut between scenes, he used an accelerating rhythm of cuts to physically increase the emotional temperature of the scene. He used the speed of the cuts to convey the complex, frantic emotional states of the protagonists.
It's the steam engine sequences that are particularly famous.
Yes. Famous short impressions from a world of rails, signals, and masses of steel dashing into the distance.
And think about how they had to do this. We edit on computers today with the click of a mouse. Gans and his editor, Marguerite Bourget, were physically holding strips of flammable celluloid up to a light bulb,
Very dangerous work.
looking at individual frames, slicing them with a razor blade, and gluing them together. And they were cutting these individual shots together so quickly that they follow each other in an absolute blur on the screen.
Which was revolutionary.
The book describes it as creating a sort of visual consonance, equivalent to the collective sound of many instruments playing together in a symphony orchestra.
It's a very striking description because up until that point, you have to remember the state of cinema was often very static and theatrical.
Like watching a play.
We were transitioning from pure fairground spectacle, like the Lumiere brothers just filming a train arriving at a station to scare an audience, into trying to tell a narrative story. But the camera was usually bolted down on a tripod like a theater audience member.
You couldn't move.
The edits were purely functional. You only cut when the scene was over and the actors walked off stage.
Right. But Gans is saying, what if the cuts are the scene? He realized something profound about human psychology. He realized you could hack the viewer's brain using the persistence of vision.
Okay, hack the brain is a bit strong.
But he did. If you show a split-second shot of a spinning iron wheel, then a blindingly fast cut to a flashing signal, then a massive piston pumping, then a blast of white steam, your brain doesn't just see individual pictures.
It blurs.
Your brain stitches that together into a physical feeling of overwhelming speed, anxiety, and panic. He invented the rapid-fire montage decades ahead of its time.
The photography certainly helped sell that panic. The cinematographer was Lance Henry Burrell, assisted by Marc Boujard and Maurice Duverger. The text calls the photography beautiful and precise, but self-conscious.
I love that phrase, self-conscious.
It's very apt.
It means they knew exactly how bloody good they were, and they were showing off. They were deliberately framing these massive mechanical beasts, these steam trains, to look like terrifying industrial gods.
It definitely influenced modernist art. The source notes that Gans made explicit references to contemporary art movements, particularly the work of Fernand Léger.
Which is a brilliant connection for the book to make. Fernand Léger, 1881 to 1955, the French painter and filmmaker.
He was a big deal.
His paintings use tubular, conical, and cubic geometric forms, heavily influenced by the chaos of modern technology. He was obsessed with the sheer beauty and terror of the Machine Age.
Right.
Léger actually produced and directed his own futurist film, Ballet Mécanique, in 1924, just a year after The Wheel.
Yeah.
You can draw a direct, undeniable line from Gans's rapidly edited trains to Léger's avant-garde mechanical ballets.
The book says that in the specific parts of the film, the director's aim to make a vision of the world of modern technology is successfully achieved. And I agree with that assessment. The editing is bloody brilliant in isolation.
I hear a massive but coming.
But the text also says Gans overdid his portrayal of an almost human emotional link between Sisyphe and his steam engine.
Overdid it.
Yes, overdid it. The engine is practically a protagonist in the film. Gans is giving this all-embracing pantheistic treatment to enormous metal mechanisms. He's treating a train like it has a soul, like it feels Sisyphe's romantic pain.
Which is beautiful.
Yeah.
The Industrial Revolution had completely transformed Europe. People were terrified of machines, but also in awe of them. Modernist art at the time could only envy that treatment, according to the book.
It's exhausting, is what it is. Because a few technically impressive train montages do not rescue a dragging, miserable story.
Come on.
You can have the most... Because the visual symphony was accompanied by an actual literal symphony in the theater. And it resulted in what I can only describe as an absolute hostage situation for the poor audience.
Oh, you're talking about the runtime.
I am talking about the 8-hour endurance test.
This is the best part. This is where Gantz proves he is a mad genius of the highest cinematic order.
Wait. You think an 8-hour film about a train driver's incestuous romantic torment is genius?
Let me lay out the facts for the listener so they can judge for themselves. The original length of the wheel was 10,200 meters of physical film footage.
Absolute madness.
Let me repeat that. 10,200 meters. That translates to a continuous 8-hour runtime.
Shown exactly once, on December 14th, 1922.
But imagine being in that audience. Imagine you were sitting in a grand theater in Paris in 1922. And it wasn't just a silent film playing in a quiet room.
Obviously not.
It was accompanied by a massive live orchestra playing music written specifically for the event by no lesser composer than Arthur Honegger.
The man who wrote Pacific 231.
Exactly. Pacific 231 is an orchestral work that literally imitates the sound of a steam locomotive building up speed. It actually became Honegger's most frequently performed piece.
Sure, it's a good piece of music on its own.
Imagine the physical exhaustion of that live orchestra roaring for 8 hours. The strings and brass simulating the chugging, hissing, and screeching of a massive steam engine, while Gantz's rapid-fire montage is exploding on the screen in front of you.
My ears are ringing just thinking about it.
And you are completely immersed in this epic, tragic, mythic saga for an entire day.
It sounds like torture. It sounds like sensory overload to the point of nausea.
It sounds like the cinematic holy grail. He invented the concept of the binge watch a century early.
Oh, rubbish.
Think about it. Honestly, today, people will sit on their sofa and watch 8 hours of a prestige TV drama on Netflix in one sitting without batting an eye. We celebrate long-form narrative stamina. We praise creators who take their time to build a world. Gantz was just doing it in 1922.
You are comparing sitting in your pajamas on a comfortable sofa eating crisps to being trapped in a freezing 1920s cinema for 8 hours.
It's the same immersive intent.
Listening to a brass section pretend to be a train while you watch a blind man operate a funicular, it is not the same thing at all. The book explicitly states that this lack of moderation was treacherous and particularly damaging.
Damaging to its commercial prospects, maybe? Because theater owners couldn't turn over the seats for multiple showings?
Damaging to the art. I'll quote the book directly for you. It is difficult to find another famous film which needs pruning as badly as this one.
Pruning?
That is a direct quote from the source. The 8-hour original had absolutely no chance of finding a distributor. None. Because nobody in their right mind would book a single film that takes up the entire working day.
Which is why it was drastically reduced. They eventually cut it down from 10,200 meters to 4,200 meters.
They cut 60% of the film. Do you understand the sheer volume of that? They threw out more than half of the movie just to make it barely distributable.
It's a tragedy.
And even then, the book notes, even the shortened version, a mere 40% of the original footage is far too long.
But don't you see the incredible cultural tragedy in that? The 40% version is all we have left. The original 8-hour vision, the complete uncompromised synthesis of all narrative arts, from the 19th century novel to ancient Greek tragedy to modernist symphony, was butchered by commercial demands.
It wasn't butchered, it was salvaged. It was rescued from its own creator's ego.
Rescued.
Look at it this way. If a sculptor starts with a massive, ugly, misshapen block of marble and chips away 60% of it, you don't mourn the marble dust on the floor. You hope what's left is a decent statue.
But what if he had already sculpted a sprawling, magnificent, intricate frieze, and the distributor just came in with a sledgehammer and said, "We only have room in the gallery for one guy and a horse, smash the rest of it."
Gantz didn't sculpt a magnificent frieze, he sculpted a rambling, incoherent mess. And the 8-hour runtime is the ultimate, undeniable proof of his megalomania.
You keep using that word.
Because he was a director who simply couldn't tell the difference between a profound dramatic pause and a boring, tedious delay. He thought every single frame he shot in those 3 years was absolutely vital.
Because he was pioneering. When you were inventing the very language of cinema from scratch, You don't know what the rules are yet? There is no textbook for you to follow.
But you still have to have common sense.
You have to try everything. You have to push the boundaries until they break.
And that is exactly why we need to look at the final sober verdict rendered by the author of Cinema, The Magic Vehicle, because I feel entirely vindicated by how this book sums up the entire ordeal.
The conclusion of the piece is definitely a powerful one. It's very poetic.
It's damning, is what it is. Let's read the final summary from the book.
Go ahead.
It is unfortunate that too many chords in this screen symphony sound false. What remains of value is the editing, the convincingly real microcosm of the railway station, the snowy alpine landscapes, the occasional lyricism, and the poetry. Wait for the kicker. The Wheel could have been a masterpiece, but alas, is only the greatest of the failed masterpieces.
Right there. Did you hear that last bit?
Yes, the greatest of the failed masterpieces. Emphasis on failed. Even your precious guidebook calls it a failure.
No. Emphasis on greatest. The greatest of the failed masterpieces. You are completely missing the poetry of that statement.
I'm not missing anything. It says too many chords in this screen symphony sound false. It explicitly points out a total lack of narrative and tonal harmony.
But look at the incredible positives it admits are there. The convincingly real microcosm of the railway station. He built a functioning, breathing world on screen.
Yes, a literal station.
The snowy alpine landscapes. That brutal 3-year location shoot paid off in breathtaking, authentic visuals.
At great cost.
The occasional lyricism and the poetry. This book, which has been ripping into his narrative coherence for pages, has to begrudgingly admit that the film achieves actual transcendent poetry.
Occasional lyricism, occasional poetry. For a film that originally ran for 8 hours, occasional is not a ringing endorsement.
It's enough.
It means you sit through hours of a blind bloke moping over his adopted daughter just to get 5 minutes of decently edited train footage.
It is better to aim for the sun and miss than to make a safe, boring, 90-minute drawing room comedy that nobody remembers.
That's a false dichotomy.
The Wheel is a failed masterpiece, yes, but the fact that it is a masterpiece at all, in its sheer, uncompromising ambition, is what matters. This film is the grandfather of every ambitious, bloated, glorious cinematic epic that followed.
You're romanticizing failure now.
You don't get 2001, A Space Odyssey, you don't get Apocalypse. Now, without directors like Abel Gance deciding to push the medium past its breaking point and daring to fail.
Oh, please do not compare The Wheel to Apocalypse Now. Coppola had a script that actually made thematic sense.
Coppola shot in the jungle for ages, went wildly over budget, dealt with natural disasters, and almost went mad. It's the exact same artistic spirit. Gance in the freezing Alps, Coppola in the sweltering Philippines.
The difference is that one resulted in a tight psychological descent into the heart of human darkness, and the other resulted in a Greek geologist causing 2 blokes to fall off a cliff because of a misunderstanding.
You are obsessed with the geologist.
Because it proves how utterly ridiculous the writing is. Gance was trying so hard to be Victor Hugo, but he was writing like a teenager who just discovered Greek mythology in the school library and wanted to cram it all into one story to sound smart.
It's mythic resonance.
Sisyphus, Oedipus, Antigone, trains, blindness, cliffs, geologists. It's too much.
It's maximalism. It's the roaring 20s. Everything was too much. The art world was exploding. Fernand Léger was painting massive canvases of tubes and cones. Honegger was writing symphonies about industrial trains.
So we excuse a bad script because of the era.
The world was industrializing at a terrifying speed, shaking off the trauma of the First World War, and Gance captured that terror and beauty perfectly in his editing. The rapid-fire montage is the heartbeat of the 20th century.
The editing is a technical milestone. I have never denied that. I will give you that point forever. Transplanting Griffith's cross-cutting and accelerating the rhythm was a genuine, monumental breakthrough in visual psychology. But a technique is not a film. A technique is just a tool. And Gance used a brilliant, groundbreaking tool to construct a thoroughly dodgy, unstable house.
I reckon you were just entirely closed off to the romantic agony of the silent era. You want clean, modern 3-act structures. You want everything tied up with a neat little bow. The Wheel is messy because human emotion is messy.
I want a film that respects my time. If a director demands that I sit in a theater for a third of my day, he better have a story that justifies it, not a soap opera dressed up in ancient Greek robes.
And I maintain that the epic tragedy of Sisyphe, Ellie, and Norma, set against the unforgiving mechanical brutality of the railway and the sublime terror of the Alps, justifies every single frame of that 10,200 meters of footage.
You're delusional.
It is a bloody masterpiece, and anyone listening should immediately seek out whatever surviving fragments they can find, put on Honegger's symphony, and experience it.
And I say it is a fascinating artifact for film students studying editing, but an absolute chore for anyone else. If you value your sanity, you'll stick to the 40% cut. Or better yet, just listen to Honegger's Pacific 231 on the radio and call it a day.
You are impossible. You're looking at the Sistine Chapel and complaining that your neck hurts from looking up.
I'm looking at a sprawling, disorganized, chaotic mural and wishing the painter had the discipline to buy a smaller canvas. Which actually raises a genuinely fascinating point if we connect this to the bigger picture. We've been arguing about scale this whole time.
The scale is the entire point.
But here is a question for you and for anyone listening to seriously mull over.
All right, what is it?
Think about the media we consume today. When a piece of art pioneers entirely new technical languages like modern rapid-fire editing, but relies on antiquated 19th century melodramatic storytelling, does the medium of cinema inherently favor the concise over the colossal?
Ooh, that is a big question.
Can a film or any piece of visual media ever truly survive its own creator's complete and utter lack of moderation?
I say yes. The ambition is the legacy.
And I say the 60% of this film currently rotting on a cutting room floor proves otherwise.
You just don't get the vision, mate. It's absolute genius.
That's a shambles.
Genius.
Not a rubbish. Just read the book.
The book says greatest.
The book says failed.